understand Mars in Sagittarius, first of all, just keep in mind that basically the planet Mars is synergistic with the sign Sagittarius because Sagittarius is a fire sign and Mars is a fire planet. So Mars will do well in any fire signs. Fire means masculinity. It's symbolic of masculinity, and Mars is the planet of masculinity. So if Mars is in any of the fire signs, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, basically it does well. And that basically doing well means the masculinity prospers because the fire of Mars is supported by the fire of its sign. Of the three fire signs, Sagittarius is not as awesome for Mars as the other two, because the nature of the planets ruling these fire signs is different. Sagittarius belongs to Jupiter, which is not as masculine as the Sun and Mars, who are the owners of Leo and Aries. So Mars is a bit stronger in Leo than it is in Sagittarius, and still a bit stronger in Aries than it is in Leo. Nonetheless, it's still fundamentally pretty darn good when you have Mars in Sagittarius. So basically, how to evaluate the whole thing is to simply say that the entire symbolic tree of Mars will basically prosper, because the whole symbolic tree of Mars is rooted on the theme of masculinity. So therefore you'll see stuff like Mars and fire signs. It will be a person with a good sense of getting things started, not an unhealthy sense of not being patient. They have a good physique. They have a good muscle structure. They're not overly obsessed with using their muscle. They're strong, and they don't shy away from contest, but they're not trying to, get into contest every opportunity they get. They're good with technology and tools. They're self-reliant and independent, yet they're not impossible to get along with. So in other words, you get a Mars and fire signs gives you a masculinity which is more functional, highly functional, and not disruptive. So you could actually call it educated masculine. Educated masculine means, in other words, they're going to be wise or smart about manly things. So if you look on the tree of Mars' symbolism, you can find manly things like muscle, contest, war, competition, getting ahead, getting what you want. Educated masculinity has finesse or sophistication about these things. So they may be a good war strategist with a Mars in Sagittarius, which may mean in general they're a good strategist because you can look at everything as a type of war. They're good in politics. They're good with understanding the dynamics of competition and then therefore how to get ahead in any kind of scenario. And therefore they're pretty good, educated about how to achieve ambitions and get what they want. So there isn't too much of a need to bring out specific synergies between Mars and Sagittarius. And there aren't that many specific synergies. There's just this basic underlying synergy that Mars is masculine and Sagittarius is a masculine sign, a fire sign. However, one of the things which is worth noting is that Mars is the planet of ambition. And Sagittarius, its main nature is that it's very lofty. It's ambitious because it's fire. But because it's ruled by Jupiter, it's ambitious in kind of an ideological or philosophical or moral sense. So when we describe Sagittarius, instead of using the word ambitious, we usually use a word like lofty. Nonetheless, this is the same basic dynamic, ambition and loftiness. So with Mars in Sagittarius, the person has bigger ambitions. They have loftier goals. They're not really so content with hunting mosquitoes. They want to go out and, go after the big prizes. Also, this tends to mean they have libido. Libido basically is the basic biological version of ambition. So a person with a high ambition generally has a high libido as well. So basically Mars in Sagittarius is showing a person with a big ambition and also pretty strong or healthy sex drive. And then the emotions in general tend to be pretty sharp or pretty passionate. Now, having used that word sharp, this word sharp is important to Mars. Mars is sharp because it's male. Male means to go into something, and sharpness is what gets you into something. And Mars specifically represents weapons and tools, so sharp things, blades, etc. Mars being sharp and pointed, it's a bit at odds with Sagittarius, which likes to be broad because it's the dual sign and belongs to Jupiter, who expands. So there is a small twist, and this is the way in which Mars in Sagittarius is a little less great than Mars in the other two fire signs, Leo or Aries, because there's a bit of a clash here between Mars being pointed, focused, and sharp versus Sagittarius being broad and diversified. So the native who has Mars in Sagittarius very likely has a complication on this issue of being sharp where they should be broad, or sometimes perhaps being broad where they should be sharp. So to define that a little bit more clearly, they'll be taking a strong, definite stand on an issue, often where they could be more sensitive to various viewpoints. And therefore, they tend to get into debate. The nature of Sagittarius is to be philosophical. The nature of Mars is to be a bit argumentative. So Mars in Sagittarius tends to get into a debate or an argument and make clear distinctions between supporters and non-supporters, friends and enemies, people who believe and people who don't believe, infidels and fidels, heretics and orthodox. So that gets complicated and it gets a bit divisive. And that is part of the downside, the smaller downside of Mars in Sagittarius. Now, taking a look at some actual people who have Mars in Sagittarius, we find a lot of politicians with Mars in Sagittarius, because this is the basic nature, is that the masculinity becomes kind of educated or refined or highly functioning. So they become educated or refined about how to take over the world, or how to control the people, or how to dominate people. And so they become good at politics. So you do really find a lot of politicians with Mars in Sagittarius. Here are some of the ones that we will look at today. I'm going to actually look at all of these because there's interesting commonalities. Hugo Chavez, Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande, Imran Khan, Vladimir Putin, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, I think you say Ataturk, and Francois Fillon, and Richard Nixon. Then you have a very bad guy, Ted Bundy. This is interesting because it doesn't really seem like he's educated masculine. It seems like he's pretty bad masculine. But actually, Ted Bundy is pretty complex violence. So there must be something weird going on in his chart. We'll take a look at his chart as well. You also have a few cases of very important thinkers and very good authors. Very important thinkers is kind of understandable because Mars in Sagittarius will put passion into philosophy and make people who like to debate ideas. So Voltaire, for example, is a philosopher with Mars in Sagittarius. Carl Jung, the psychologist, philosopher. Then we have Benjamin Franklin, like the inventor or the forward thinker. Then these three authors, Jules Verne, Agatha Christie, and Arthur Rimbaud. There's also other various interesting people, Gianni Versace, Howard Hughes, and Jackie Chan. Martial arts, a more evolved version of fighting. There are many, many, many female entertainers, or entertainers in general with Mars and Sagittarius, but it's especially, you'll see a pattern with female entertainers. Because this is always more prominent when you have a masculine trait in a female or a feminine trait in a male, it becomes more noticeable. So Mars in Sagittarius or in any fire sign is particularly masculine. When you put that in a female chart, you notice it more. So some of the female entertainers with Mars in Sagittarius is Janis Joplin and Joan Baez. These are very Marsy women. They're very independent and defiant of norms. You also have Rihanna, J-Lo, Mariah Carey, Avril Lavigne, a bravery type. Ellen DeGeneres, Kim Kardashian, and Greta Garbo, one of the original movie stars. Now, as for looking into some of these charts in more detail, because that is in fact quite important, Mars in Sagittarius is something on paper or in theory, but it's not until you put it in an actual chart, until you see how it really works. Taking the politicians first, Hugo Chavez, who is Venezuelan, he has a Mula Mars. This is going to be one of the common things. Most of these people have Mula Mars. There's something about Mula, the nakshatra Mula, which helps Mars, in addition to it being in Sagittarius, because Mula is incisive and it goes deep. It's penetrative. It's about digging into roots. Mars likes that. Mars does well in Mula, does well or gets power in Mula. So Hugo Chavez is a Mula Mars. Now his Mars in Sagittarius has the aspect of Saturn, giving it malefic power, and has an exalted Jupiter. Now the condition of Jupiter will be important when understanding any planet in Sagittarius, because Jupiter is the lord of Sagittarius. So no matter what planet you're trying to interpret in Sagittarius, you want to base a lot of the final decision about it on how Jupiter is doing. If Jupiter is doing good, then much more likely that the good possibilities of the planet in Sagittarius will come out. If Jupiter is doing bad, then it's much less likely that the good ones will come out, and it's more likely that some weird permutations will happen. So this situation that Hugo Chavez has is mirrored in two other people that are on this short list. Angela Merkel from Germany and Francois Hollande from France. Sorry for the pronunciations. They all have this condition. Mars in Mula, aspected by Saturn, exalted Jupiter. So this Jupiter-Saturn aspect on Mars is giving political power, ability to influence massive amounts of people and have massive, significant, real control. Then we come to Imran Khan from Pakistan, another Mula Mars, aspected by Saturn again from Libra. So this Mars doesn't have exalted Jupiter, but it has exalted Saturn aspecting it. And then Vladimir Putin has the exact same condition as this. So Vladimir Putin is also a Mula Mars aspected by exalted Saturn. Then we have Mustafa Kemal Atatürk from Turkey, who has not a Mula Mars. He's a Jeshta Mars, which is also quite advantageous to the nature of Mars because Jeshta is highly ambitious. So he's a Jeshta Mars, and it's an exchange with Jupiter. So Jupiter is in a Mars sign, Mars is in Sagittarius. This is going to also make the better side of Mars and Sagittarius come out. Francois Fillon, who is French also, is also a Jeshta Mars. And his Mars is exactly opposite to Jupiter. So to have a planet in a sign and to have that sign influenced by its lord, or to have a planet in a sign influenced by the lord of that sign, is very auspicious. It's very good. Richard Nixon, however, has none of these significant things, which maybe is why he's known as one of the worst politicians in history. Nixon from the USA just has a Mula Mars, and actually this Mars is very, very close to the sign border. So this is the interesting thing with these politicians. A very interesting pattern comes out about how important it is for Mars and Sagittarius to be aspected by Saturn for a politician, or by Jupiter, or to have Jupiter be really well off. Another chart to look at in detail is Ted Bundy, because he's not a educated masculine person, but that's what Mars and Sagittarius is supposed to represent. Well, Ted Bundy's Mars is a Jeshta Nakshatra Mars. The really significant thing with him, although it's exchanged to Jupiter, so he does become very well known. The really significant thing about his Mars is that it's conjoined Ketu. So just in that, you can expect it to become weird a little bit, and then you have to look at the rest of the chart to figure out what makes him Ted Bundy. But you will get your suspicions about Mars just looking at it in isolation by the fact that it's with Ketu. Mars Ketu is not a happy combination. Another chart to look at in more detail, Agatha Christie. Why she's a great author, and in fact we have 3 significant authors on the list. The nature of Agatha Christie authorship is interesting. Isn't it murder mystery as far as I know? And Jules Verne is like exploration, very Mars, strong Mars type of themes. Does Mars in Sagittarius make you a writer? It contributes because it puts passion into Sagittarius, which likes words and likes communication, likes knowledge exchange. But honestly, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to being an author. There must be other things in these author charts that are foundational to them being authors, and Mars and Sagittarius must be a ornamental piece of that puzzle. So to look at Agatha Christie in particular, she has Mars and Mula on the ascendant, so it's not like it's not a dominant Mars. It is. But the real significant things about her chart in regards to authorship, first lord in the 3rd house. The 3rd house is the house for authors and writers, communicators, who communicates through writing especially. His 3rd house. First lord in the 3rd house, 3rd lord in the 10th house, career. And the 10th lord is in the 11th, entertainment. So this is very, very, very strong indicator of somebody that could have a career in writing books, writing novels. And on top of that, her midhaven, which is a very important point for career, is flanked by the artistic planets, Mercury and Venus. So she has a chart which is basically for becoming an author. The fact that she has Mars in Sagittarius inclines her to have complicated ideas about manly things like violence and murder. Rihanna, she's Mula Mars, which is in a Raj Yoga exchange with Jupiter. So, in other words, Mars and Jupiter own trines and kendras in her chart, and they're doing an exchange. So it's fantastic. And it is conjoined to a Capricorn Saturn. How can you be conjoined with a Capricorn Saturn if you're in Sagittarius? Well, if you're at the end of Sagittarius and Capricorn Saturn is at the beginning of it, you could get conjoined. So in other words, her Mars has this nature of being very powerful and able to influence a lot of people from Sagittarius. The Mars in Sagittarius, which likes to influence people because it's extroversive like a male. It gets the power to do so by its contact with Saturn, as we saw in all those politicians' charts. And this Saturn is in a good condition because it's right next door in Capricorn, its own sign. Also, as to why she's a great singer, her second lord Venus is on the ascendant with the moon, who is the 4th lord. So I hope you found that very interesting to understand not only the theoretical understanding of what Mars and Sagittarius represents, but also practical applications of how it actually works out in different people's charts when it's under different circumstances. Thank you very much. Now, what we do in these videos with the planets and the signs is I show you a consistent technique that you can use for any planet and any sign. And the technique is very simple. You look for where the planet symbolizes something that's very, very similar to what the sign symbolizes. And once you find that, you assess whether or not the planet and the sign are harmonious about that thing or whether they're antithetical about that thing. The dissonant resonance reveals what's complex or difficult for the native. The harmonious resonance, on the other hand, indicates what's easy, what comes natural, what's an inherent strength for the native. What I'm teaching you really is the method of how to do astrological interpretation by going down into the engine of the symbolism and comparing the parts. the actual interpretation that you should give is going to be individualized per the individual chart. So if you have person A with the moon in Scorpio and person B with the moon in Scorpio, it's not going to be exactly the same interpretation, because person B's moon might have an aspect from something and person A's moon doesn't, etc., 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 etc. But what I'm showing you in the videos is the backbone of what a planet in a sign symbolizes. And once you understand that backbone, you modify it based on the circumstances, the extraneous circumstances that are affecting it in an individual chart. So I hope you really like this system, not just this one video, but all the videos that we do on the planets and the signs. We'll do them all. And I hope you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those. And I hope to see you around soon. Thank you.